template.
There's no template here for this.
Well, there wasn't a template. Well, certainly in the U.S. of A., many incredible female world leaders to draw upon. But what was fascinating about what they also created was to create a female president who had not had the ambition towards that position, and on an ambition and an experience level, perhaps was ill-prepared. Therefore, the job became finding within Laura Roslin inner resources of power that had been heretofore undiscovered. So it became kind of an interesting exploration of women and their personal relationship to power, which can sometimes have a push-pull internally. So that was basically my experience, was drawing on that push-pull, and from there taking actions that quite often fell into the area of sort of a more masculine, classically masculine energy, which was a survival, clear action. And there were times when this president's femininity had to be put to the side, might we say. So when I hear these stories about girls, and I see high school girls here, and you're asking questions about technology, and we're hearing these horrific things that are still happening to women, and we're also talking about a female president. My hope for all of it is that we begin to, as Eddie said with race, understand the human rights of the female, and understand that those rights are as legitimate and powerful and necessary for the survival of the planet as some of the other issues that we face. And a lot of those feelings and ideas would come up playing her as personal, internal thoughts.
Right.
But in the world of Battlestar, there was not really ever a problem, except occasionally a few quips about the school teacher. It was never really an issue.
So, Radhika, what is the UN actively doing now to make sure that we can keep a better eye on child warriors and all of the things that are happening with young women around the world? And what can they do? All those nice young people sitting there, what can they do? Because I know part of the reason y'all are here is for some solutions that you can work on. So listen up.
I think if you have to divide two parts to the UN's response. The first is to punish and deter perpetrators. I think that's really important. First is a sense of justice, but also as deterrence. So what we have started over the time is now with the International Criminal Court to begin to punish people. Now there's a first case before the court was a case of Thomas Lubanga, who was recruiting and using children. Another case of sexual violence. These are international courts that are actually trying cases. There are a lot of technical rules that doesn't cover everybody, but at least it's a beginning. It sends a strong signal. And the Security Council Resolution 1612 also, you will be the victim of sanctions if you recruit and use children. So those things are slowly, I'm not saying they're final, but that being set in place. The second is at the programmatic level. What we have is UNICEF on the ground. We have UNIFEM and we have UNHCR. These groups, they run programs for these children. For the victims of sexual violence. In DRC, they're supporting this hospital. They run programs for reintegrating child soldiers back to their families. That's not so easy. You can't just take a child who's been killing and just hand him over to the mother. The mother can't handle him sometimes. So you have to work with the family, with the mother and the child. So these are all programmatic things that we're doing in the area. So for these children, of course, one is to maybe adopt children in this work that are in the field, that are working with UNICEF, to support the work of UNICEF and others in the field would be very useful through programs and ideas and taking part in their activities.
I need to ask you this question because it just popped into my head. Is it difficult when you're dealing with all these delegates, many of who come from countries where women are third after the horse, is it difficult to convince them, just as delegates, to change their thinking?
You know, it's very interesting, but at the normative level, everybody ascribes to it. Now, the two most signed conventions in the world are the Convention on the Rights of the Child and Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, especially the Convention on the Rights of the Child. They think of their daughters, they think of their sons, but they make reservations when it comes to personal life, in the distribution of property, in the distribution of child custody, those kinds of issues, there's a lot of discrimination. But on the violence issue, generally, people, at least at the United Nations, come on board and you can get a consensus.
I'm glad to hear that. Now, number one.
Hello. Thank you so much, everybody here, for coming. It's amazing I didn't have to pay admission and go to a Comic-Con convention. I simply had to... I simply had to stand in a line, and I'm here. A very short line, by the way. My question is going to pit the president versus the commander for maybe their final time. I don't know. This is for Mary and for Edward James, and this goes along the point of our kind children's ambassador we have, first speaker. The question itself is, does the military get to dictate to the people, or does democracy prevail? Now, this is a question about capital punishment, which is a recurring theme in the show. And I have another two parts to this. The airlock was, I think, like walking the plank. Now, was the airlock a crime/violence deterrent? Did it work? Does it ever work? And can you ever truly right a wrong? Thank you, and I would like to hear from Madam President and from the Commander Adama.
I think it is a crime. I think the airlock is an action that is a crime. It's a violation of life. I think that my experience inside the show and having the great opportunity to explore the condition of war and what it does to a human being and what it does to the population surrounding the positions of leadership made me realize that we are continually committing crimes in order to convince ourselves that we're right. And it is the commitment to being right that has to be given up, because to me it's the root of the war crime behavior. And the experience of having to send people out an airlock, once again, was a haunting experience. And I would imagine that there are many people who commit these crimes who have a haunted experience from that point on. And wouldn't it be a wonderful thing if we could find a way, a different way, to approach the enemy and resolve the situations? So on a certain level, I do think it's a crime. I was absolutely committed to it as Laura Roslin in the moment, because as the actor, you work inside a certain set of confines, and you have a container, and that's where you make your choices.